Welcome to the Urban Wine Club podcast. Pour a glass, sit back, and enjoy the show.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Urban Wine Club podcast. I'm Ari and I am here with my co-host Foti, and today we have a very special guest, somebody who had the pleasure of meeting prior to this, and you know, it was a good atmosphere, good time, and the product he represents is amazing. Before I get into it, let me bring on Foti. How are you, Foti?
I'm well, Ari, and to your point, the word amazing really fits in this episode because, you know, even though as the Urban Wine Club podcast, we love all things spirits, wine, alcohol. And the industry is constantly evolving. The industry is constantly bringing new and exciting items to market. And in this episode, our guest is bringing something that's beyond exciting. So without further ado, let's bring on our guest, the founder of SUYO Pisco, Alex Hildebrandt. Thank you so much for joining us. I know you're a busy guy because you're always traveling, but I'm sure you got your plate full. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. I appreciate you both having me, and more than happy to spend some time with you guys. I'm really excited about this and looking forward to eventually getting to some tasting in person.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So let's start off. Foti, go ahead.
Yeah, as you were going to mention, but we said about the changing in ever so often evolving industry in alcohol, and we're being always subject to trends and what's new and what have you. But your product is not a trend. It's been around for a long time, and I think in every aspect of the industry, thanks to the native cuisines that pop up restaurant wise, it's that opportunity that these great restaurants who represent their cultures are bringing also into the picture the beverages or spirits or wine for that matter that represent their culture. So I think there's been a big movement in the last 10 years with Peruvian cuisine, hence why I think the introduction to Pisco is coming to light.
That's right. And we feel like the timing is now for us to sort of ride the coattails of Peruvian gastronomy, which, as you alluded to there, has really been on fire for the past few years. And more recently, you have 2023, 4 of the top restaurants in the world, of the top 50 restaurants in the world, were in Lima, Peru. There's a lot of eyeballs on Peru, not just for its amazing beaches, its amazing weather, and obviously you have Machu Picchu and its culture. There's really a lot of rich history, but more so recently, you have a lot of eyeballs on the culinary scene. You have this really amazing fusion of cultures from all around the world that came together to make some amazing, amazing food. And with that, I think historically, oftentimes people tend to overlook the really, really great spirit scene that exists too, more specifically Pisco. So I think we have a really great opportunity right now to start that conversation where people are already thinking about Peruvian food. People are better understanding the culture. And this is really what, if you think prior to that, what inspired myself and my business partner, Ian, to start SUYO was to celebrate our culture and to get people to understand Peru and look at it through a different lens than they have historically. It's not just Machu Picchu. It's not just llamas as might come to mind right away. There's so much more to it. And what better tip of the spear than Pisco? People love having conversations and getting to know each other over food and drink. Food is well on its way. Drink comes next. This is the way we approach it.
On that note, Alex, can I just say a little story? When I first met you, you were at an establishment and you were at the bar and you were hanging out with a bunch of people and you guys were drinking. And then when I met you, you were explaining to me that you were drinking your product. And I was like, oh, cool. So you brought all these people over here and you guys were drinking your product. That's cool. And you're like, no, I don't know that. I just met them here. So like that whole vibe was like, that is it, man. That's so cool. Like you met some people there. You were drinking your product. They were interested. They started drinking. I think you guys finished the bottle right there. I was like, this is something. It's really
magical. And Alex, before we get into your personal journey, I think for our audience, can we actually discuss what Pisco is?
Of course. I think that's a really, really great starting point so that we have everyone sort of on the same page. And there are, even amongst people who have had Pisco or have heard of Pisco, I think there are oftentimes some misconceptions about what it is. So a great place to level set and I'll sort of give you the summary version, but we can dive as deep as you'd like. I'll leave it up to you. Starting from the top, what we have is a grape-based spirit. So Pisco comes from grapes, and what makes it uniquely Pisco is the following. It has to come from one of 5 regions in Peru. This is a denomination of origin controlled product. So if you think tequila, mezcal, champagne, cognac, etc., they all have their denominations of where it needs to come from. So first, you sort of have region. Secondly, you have grape varietals that it must come from. There are 8 grape varietals that you're allowed to make Pisco from. These are grape varietals that were brought by the Spanish during the conquest in the 1500s. So you actually have the first grapevine that was ever brought to the Americas in the mid 1500s was near the port of Pisco in Peru. So before grapevines got to Chile, to Argentina, to Uruguay, you had them in Peru, which is a really cool thing I like to tell people about, because that's not a commonly known fact. The grape varietal was called the Listan Prieto from the Canary Islands in Spain, and now we call it the Negra Criolla in Peru, and that's sort of the godfather of the grape varietals. So there are 8 allowable grape varietals. And then lastly, you have a very, very specific process you have to adhere to be able to call it Pisco. And this really makes it special for the following reasons. You're only allowed to, so first of all, we press the grapes, much like we're making a wine. So we make an entirely dry wine. And in our case, it's a natural wine. The one thing that the denomination does not require is that you use ambient or natural yeast, spontaneous fermentation. There are some producers who use commercial yeast, which is totally okay. But the vast majority of producers are going to be using spontaneous fermentation, so just using the yeast from the environment. That's what we use. We make a dry wine, so there's no residual sugars, and then you distill only one time. This is part of what makes Pisco super unique. You're only allowed to, by law, distill the product one time, and it has to be using a copper alembic or alembic still, or something called a falca, which is sort of your more traditional pot still, which you see in many, many other cultures. If you distill that more than one time, you're no longer allowed to call it Pisco. So it comes off the still, and you're typically, because this is because grapes are high in natural sugar, your fermented juice, your wine that goes into the distillation process is already going to be in the teens, kind of 12, 13%. So you really only do have to distill it one time to achieve a higher than 40%. By contrast, other spirits that you might have, take a tequila, for instance, the agave is not as high in natural sugar, so you're going to need to distill it multiple times to get higher than 40%. That's part of what's fun about Pisco, is you only need to distill it one time. So you distill it once, it comes off the still, and it must be distilled to proof. So you're not allowed to add anything at any point once it comes off the still. No water to proof it down to 40%, certainly no additives, as you see in many other categories. So as a result, what you end up with is what I believe to be the only spirit in the world that's only made with one ingredient. Nothing ever touches the inside of a bottle except for grapes. So you have this distillate that's distilled to proof, and how do we get it to finalize before it gets in the bottle? The denomination of origin requires that it's rested for a minimum of 3 months, and it's in neutral containers. So you're never allowed to put it in wood. It's always going to be a clear distillate. And the reason for the resting is to allow some oxygenation, allow the flavors to round up to get to know each other. Right off the still, something's typically pretty volatile, so you want to let it spend some time to mellow out. Without diving too deep into it, there are a lot of philosophies amongst producers on how long to rest it for. And that's part of the beauty of it. So our producers rest typically anywhere between 18 to 24 months. That's kind of the sweet spot that we've found, but we have a friend who rests it for 10 years, and that's super cool too. I think you get some of these more drier, raisiny compote notes that are interesting, but we typically don't do that. So once it's rested for a minimum of 3 months in neutral containers, you're allowed to bottle it, and this all must happen in Peru because it's a denomination of origin controlled product. Then it's okay to bring it to the US or wherever. Currently we're, as a brand, which I think we'll get to later, we're only importing to the US, and then of course we are available in Peru as well. That was Lima, Peru is our launch market, and then we sort of expanded into Cusco and some other smaller markets. But right now it's just Peru and the US. That's kind of the high level on Pisco, but happy to dive in further too.
So it's almost, I'm not going to use the word equivalent, but it reminds me of the process, as you mentioned, something that's made from, as a grape distillate, such as in other markets that people might recognize, like maybe grappa or even raki, which is made from grapes as well. But the process obviously there's a difference in some of these other productions. But for those that are listening, as some sort of a comparison.
Yeah, and that's a great point you bring up, Foti. A distinction I do like to make against something like a grappa. And I'm not as familiar with raki because I know there are versions of raki or rakia, whatever they call it in certain countries, that I think have different sort of standards they adhere to. But as it relates to grappa, the reason that grappa came about in Italy was because they were already making wine and they had all this pomace left over after winemaking, really the pulp and the skins that they wanted to continue to use, be productive with them. So they would really just rehydrate them, redistill them, and the byproduct, what you came of that was grappa. So you had this wine that they were making already. Let's use the excess to make grappa. The difference I would say with Pisco is what we do is we make that wine and then we distill that wine, and that's our Pisco. We still have this pomace left over that we could use to make a grappa equivalent. However, we choose not to do that, and most producers choose not to do that. Instead, it's actually still rich in nutrients. So what we choose to do is we reapply it to the fields because it can serve as a fertilizer, and the birds love to eat it. And we can really say we're using every single part of the grape, but certainly we could make a grappa equivalent if we wanted to. There's never really been that culture in Peru. I think it's kind of a purity thing. I think they don't want to confuse Pisco versus this other thing. And as I said, you can reuse it, which is fun. And other countries have things like this too. You have Orujo in Spain, you have Marc in France. They're sort of all using this excess. In Peru, you don't really have that. It's really just the Pisco.
And so the next important question for us in the audience is, like, listening to you and breaking down Pisco, which makes me want to have a drink at the moment, is your background is doesn't come from producing Pisco. So where did this all come about for you personally to dive into and create your brand?
Yeah, I don't come from a Pisco making background at all. My connection with Pisco was that I am from Peru. I was born in Peru, and I moved to the US when I was young. But Pisco has always been something that has been in the cultural moments, the celebrations with my family. Most of my family still lives in Peru, so I've been very fortunate to my entire life growing up in the States. I've traveled back and forth, and as really most other Peruvians, I was intimately familiar with Pisco, and that we consumed it, but that was it. It was something that we drank, and it wasn't really until as I grew older into my adulthood, I knew that I wanted to build something that helped me give back and reconnect with my home country, which is Peru. And it just by happenstance, in 2019, I was with my friend and now business partner in Peru. We were having a cocktail, and we were having Pisco cocktails, and we just started talking about Pisco, and we both decided that we thought it would be fun to visit a distillery the next day because we didn't know that much about it. And just this massive light bulb the next day of there could be a really, really fun opportunity here. We've always been looking for something, and really it was sort of a project. We didn't really think of it as a business. And over the course of the next 6 to 7 months, thankfully this was all before the pandemic, I made probably 6 or 7 trips. Once a month I was going down there, and we were visiting with producers to try to understand. First, it was understand the category, and then understand. We decided we wanted to bring something to America, and it was to decide really what profile we wanted and how we wanted to do it. And we quickly learned that there are over 500. I mentioned that you have to have this legal distinction to make Pisco with the denomination of origin. There are over 500 producers who have that legal distinction in Peru. Certainly there are way more than 500 who are actually producing something that they call Pisco or something else, but only 500 have that legal distinction. Of those 500 plus producers, maybe 20 of them are actually making it to the United States. And of those 20, there's really 3 or 4 that have any level of scale that you can find in the major markets. So we thought it was really a shame that these small producers that we were meeting had no vehicle to not only make it to the US, but even to the capital city of Lima, just a few hours north, where you have less than 100 of these brands that are even available in any way. So we just fell in love with this style of small batch, super artisanal, even really ancestral, if you were to compare it to a mezcal production style, that we wanted people to have an opportunity to taste. So we wound up thinking of SUYO as a two-way bridge, where on one hand, we're connecting consumers to this amazing product that exists in Peru, but at the same time, we're giving these producers an opportunity to be available in markets where they otherwise didn't have access to. So we created SUYO as a platform for that. We are a platform of small batch producers who creates single origin Pisco. And what single origin means to us is single vineyard. So everything's coming from one plot of land, single varietal. So from one grape varietal, and single vintage. Everything is just from one year. We're really taking a page out of the winemaking book. I think consumers who like wine have really understood this concept of terroir for such a long period of time. In the spirits category, I think it's not quite as celebrated. You're starting to see a lot more of it in the agave category. I think tequila, you can have these highland and lowland agaves, more so in mezcal, I think, because the geography of where you can produce mezcal is so much larger. So you have different climates that are going to impact the wild agave differently. Pisco is much like that, but grapes are much more delicate. So you actually have much more fun, I believe, variations of the way that a quebranta, which is one of our core products, can taste when it's at a coastal vineyard as opposed to a vineyard that's inland in a valley, which are two examples that we have. So we just found that to be super fun, and we wanted to be, kind of what we believe to be the first Pisco brand who's really celebrating the origin and the uniqueness that exists from each batch and celebrating that, as opposed to, I think a lot of other categories are focused on consistency and standardization, and every time it's going to taste the same. And the only way you really achieve that, I believe, is with additives in a lot of categories. And Pisco, you're not allowed to do that. So we just think that's so awesome and fun, and we want people to understand that and celebrate it. But to get back to your question, I think for us it was this pride of this thing that is uniquely Peruvian. This gives us a really cool opportunity to celebrate our culture. Let's bring this to the US. But it wasn't out of a technical, we are Pisco lovers and makers. We have become quite knowledgeable in it because we study it so hard, but we are not Pisco makers by trade. And always important to note that we want to make sure we're communicating that we're partnering with families and producers who have been doing this for a really long time. They are the ones who we want to be focusing on. We want people to see their faces and know their names. Certainly, as we've grown, we've gone back to them with feedback. Hey, do you think we could make something a little bit higher proof? And maybe we should rest for this period of time. Maybe we should harvest at this Brix amount so that we can get this flavor profile. But they're the makers. They're the ones we want to celebrate. We are really we are their bridge to market is kind of the way we think about it.
And it couldn't have been a better time. You mentioned about the awareness of producing clean products, because it's on the top of our mind with additives, chemicals. That we're in a world that a lot of products are processed, if that's the word to use, to achieve aromas, flavor profile, textures, and what have you. And to hear this, I'm sure our audience would appreciate that you're producing what we always like to use the word, a clean product that doesn't have any of that quote unquote junk in it. Yeah.
Absolutely, and this is very, very much a hot button issue, with the Surgeon General's warning or attempt at a warning earlier this week, and really, I think it's validating much of what we've been thinking since the beginning, that we are targeting what I call a conscious consumer. This is a person who is looking for something that is better for their lifestyle. That could mean many things. I'm not saying healthier. I think that's a dangerous word in this space, but better for their lifestyle. It's either makes them feel good because it's a socially conscious brand, which I believe we are, in that we do a revenue share with all of our producers. And as I mentioned, we're very vocal about celebrating them. It could be environmentally conscious when you talk about sustainability. This is something that consumers, I think, are looking for more and more increasingly. And then kind of that third one is that better for you. And again, I think this is a bit of a difficult one, because I think it's irresponsible for anyone who's making alcohol to say, I believe this is better for you or good for you. I think that's not right. But if I'm going to be drinking, I might as well drink better. So if you want to talk clean, let's talk about the only spirit in the world, as I mentioned, that I believe only has one ingredient. Sure, you have some tequilas and some mezcals that don't have additives, and that's been difficult too, that with the tequila matchmaker getting shut down, the Additive Free Alliance being, having this issue, and that's very, very challenging. But thankfully that platform exists, and I love that they have an ability to celebrate those who are making them without additives. In Peru, we don't even need that, because no one's allowed to use additives. I think that's a really big differentiator for us. So if you're looking for something in that category, let's have you try Pisco, and I think you'll be really excited about it.
On game. And Alex, this is very, for me, I'll speak for myself. I can mention as well, but being in the industry for so many years and being subject to so many different products, this has been something that for me has been so intriguing and so interesting that it gives me a different perspective about Pisco. Because I'll be honest, through the years, the only thing I really, as a consumer and being in the trade, knew about Pisco was the cocktail Pisco Sour, right? And having said that, what I wanted to ask you is, how does Alex drink Pisco?
I obviously a unique example in that as a starting point, I'm Peruvian, but then also I am the owner of a Pisco brand. So I love Pisco more than the average person. I always prefer to sip it neat or even on the rocks, which if you talk to some producers, that's sacrilege because, I've already communicated this philosophy of purity. And if you put it on an ice cube, you're not diluting it with water. I think that's kind of the mindset to some, but I say drink it however you like it. I think it's crazy to tell somebody how to drink something. So I like to drink it on the rocks, maybe with a lime. I think for me that's probably the perfect. But I too love cocktails. And I think cocktails are typically, with most consumers, it's going to be the best entry point to any spirit because high proof spirits are very much an acquired taste no matter what it is. I think a cocktail is a great way to open the door for you. So what we try to do is we like to communicate cocktails that are either very easy to make and approachable and highlight the base spirit best, or spirit forward cocktails that are achieving that same goal, but obviously are going to be geared towards a consumer that's looking for something more spirit forward in the realm of, old fashioned, Negroni, et cetera. People are familiar with that. So what I typically do is the entry point for me for someone who is not really into spirits and doesn't know anything about Pisco is I like to make them a Chilcano, which is the most popular drink in Peru. I think a lot of people think it's the Pisco Sour because that's the one that most people know about. An awesome cocktail as well. But the Chilcano is simply a version of the mule in Peru. However, this has been around since way before the Moscow Mule. Pisco, ginger ale. Some like it with a splash of lime juice, some don't. I like to just express a little bit of lime on top and drop the lime in. I say try that. Nobody doesn't like a Chilcano. You go to a house party, you go to a family gathering in Peru, that's what's available. Pisco and ginger ale, that's what you're drinking. Another really fun one that I like to have people taste, which we believe, and we've really been communicating heavily if you look at our social media, if you go to a lot of our events, is the Pisco Punch. The Pisco Punch has such a cool story, and it's a very easy build for anyone at home, and you can really elevate it at a cocktail bar as well. Are either of you two familiar with the Pisco Punch before I sort of dive into what it is?
I've heard of it, but I've never had it.
Yeah.
Awesome. So the Pisco Punch, put simply, it's really three main ingredients. You have your Pisco, you have pineapple juice, and you have lime juice. And traditionally, the way that it was made was with pineapple gum syrup, which isn't available everywhere. So I like to communicate those three that I mentioned because anyone can make this at home. The build it can be much like a margarita with those three ingredients and an optional modifier if you want, which would be a simple or an agave syrup. That's, with a margarita, you have your tequila, you have your triple sec, and you have your lime juice. With your Pisco Punch, you have Pisco, you have pineapple juice, and you have your lime juice. Either one, you can put an optional sweetener to. The history of this one is super cool. Pisco, the Pisco history, which I won't dive too deep into, but happy to if you have questions about it. Pisco's been around for really since the 1600s when they started distilling. So the grapes were brought in the mid 1500s. In the 1600s, they started distilling them because the Spanish king told them they weren't allowed to make wine anymore in Peru. So what do? We have to distill it now. Okay, that's where it comes from. So they're making this product that they are calling aguardiente de Pisco. So this is a distillate from Pisco. Pisco is a port in Peru on the coast. During the gold rush, so in the mid to late 1800s, there are ships coming from Asia and from Europe. They're coming underneath the South American, the tip of South America. They're coming up along the west coast, and they're stopping at the port of Pisco to pick up mining supplies because there's a massive mining industry in Peru. Depending on the day, it's either the first or the second largest industry in Peru behind commercial fishing. So they're literally picking up the picks and shovels in Peru to bring up to South America during the gold rush. And while they're there, logically, they start picking up these large botijas, we call them, of Pisco, these large clay amphoras, basically is what they are. They're transporting them up to San Francisco in these large botijas. And this really fun sort of subculture still exists to this day of Pisco because of this happening. There are many people who, there's no data to support this, but there are people who say that at one point in time during the gold rush, Pisco was just as popular in San Francisco and along the West Coast as whiskey was, as American whiskey was. That's how big Pisco was. Now, the Prohibition came along and ended up really killing that. Unfortunately, not killing it, but close to killing it. As this Pisco was being brought to San Francisco, there was a bartender at a bar called the Bank Saloon that today is at where the Transamerica building is. It was in the foot of that building. And he made this cocktail called the Pisco Punch. Everyone loved it. And he had this rule at his bar that you could only have two of them. in between each drink, you had to take a lap around the bar to make sure that you had your wits about you. There was a secret ingredient that was never formally agreed upon, but as one might guess during that time, it was cocaine. This was something that was pretty commonly used back then. He took his recipe with him to his deathbed, but his culture lived on, or his legend lived on. So the Pisco punch has remained to this day, and there are many variations of the Pisco punch out there. It's delicious. I mentioned sort of the build, rocks build that I would make at home. But you go to some cocktail bars, you ask for a Pisco punch, they insist on serving it up to you, chilled and up, which is an amazing expression of it too. And I think it's really great. There's actually sometimes controversy amongst bartenders about what's the right way to make a Pisco punch. I love to embrace that. If people are arguing about this, I think we're in a good place. So anyway, we'd like to really talk about that one because it's super approachable, delicious, and has a really, really fun history behind it.
That's so cool. We're big fans of history and fun facts when it comes to the category of spirits. And you'd mentioned, Alex, previously in the episode that you're currently importing into the U.S. And for our audience, are there areas in the country or are there any states that we can mention where SUYO is available?
Absolutely. So where I live and where I know Foti lives in Massachusetts, we are in Massachusetts. That was one of our first markets. The one where we've been the most active, our launch market is New York. So New York and Massachusetts, California is another good one for us, opposite coast. And then in between we're in 10 markets total. You have New Jersey, we have Connecticut, we do Rhode Island, Indiana, Kentucky, and Minnesota more recently. Those are where you can go into a bar or a restaurant or a liquor store and buy it. You can order online on our website and you can purchase in all 50 states. So we will ship it to your door. We do work with a partner who has us able to ship it to all 50 states. So if you live in Colorado or Texas, one of those states that we don't distribute into yet, you can order off of our website.
That's awesome. Alex, this has been a very enjoyable episode, informative for that matter. Inspirational at the same token. This is not the only time that we're going to be hearing from you about SUYO and Pisco. We do plan on getting together with you at some point in the near future to actually taste together and have fun with SUYO as well. I wanted to thank you for coming onto the show. Much success to you. I'm sure we're going to bump into you at some point or another to share some sort of a great cocktail from Pisco and SUYO. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you both for having me.
All right. Thank you so much, Alex. We appreciate your time. We appreciate all that awesome history. I love hearing about it. I love learning about new stuff. And this is something that I really think, everybody out there, if you haven't, please find your way to it, try it, and, write in the comments, send us messages, let us know how you like it. Thank you so much, Foti. Once again, Alex Hildebrandt. Thank you guys out there for watching, listening. Check out the show notes. We'll have information, links, everything about Alex and his brands. And thank you for watching. We'll see you guys next time.